wife Belinda and I were having a conversation over dinner last night. And I was sharing with her how for some reason this year I'm not feeling the holiday season. I love Christmas. I love Christmas. I love making gifts especially, or if I'm buying them, I love really thinking about the person and imagining what would be a lovely gift for them. I love cooking and baking and getting together to break bread. And for some reason, this year, I can't find the spark. Now, I should have been here because this is just so beautiful, and I absolutely can feel the spirit of Christmas here today. But as I reflected on it and as we had a conversation, one of the things that I was remembering, I thought, well, when I was a kid, I didn't actually have fantastic Christmases. So where the love of Christmas came from wasn't actually from the childhood experience. But I do have, and this is might be a little bit weird, but do you remember the Folgers commercial for Christmas the one I remember, when the young girl is in the kitchen and her brother comes home from school or from the military or something. I think it's from the military. And he's really quiet, and they're so quiet, and she's so excited to see her big brother come home. And they hug each other, and then the parents wake up, and oh my God, we're having the best part of waking up. And they have their coffee, right? There was something about that, and I probably would, if I saw that commercial today, would still cry. It touched my heart. It was that sense of connection and love of family and love of one another. The other one that is, I like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. Yes, right? And holding hands. And it was connection. And it was community, and it was caring for one another. And this year, I don't watch regular television, so I don't see commercials. Maybe there are even better ones out right now. But I am not connecting with that in the world. And it for me, as I think about the world right now, or the world in recent history, it kind of makes sense because the experience I have, and I'm going to speak from my own experience, is that Christmas has always been about consumerism, really, but for a long time. It's very much about consumerism. Social media, every other little thing is an advertisement for, buy this thing, this is the best one, you can't miss this out, you got to get this for your teenage boys, right? Just the constant barrage of something to buy. Now, there's nothing wrong with buying things. I'm not criticizing that. But there is this, in my experience, disproportionate focus on consumption. That's my experience. And there's also, right, in this world, in this digital world, right, of social media, so much of living and interactions takes place for many of us online. We're not actually coming together physically. That's why spiritual community, in my experience, is so important and so valuable, because it's a place and a time that we still come together. Since COVID, the experience is that so many of us stay isolated at home. We don't go to an office. We don't interact. We don't gossip around the water cooler. Where does that happen now? This is an important experience. Where is the gossip happening? Because nobody's inviting me to that Zoom call. But when we don't get together in that way, then the experience is like, this is the place and the time that I remember of us coming together to volunteer or to hear about volunteering. I grew up Catholic, and so we would have the posada, so we would walk around to different houses and do the little song and the back and forth, and then we would eat and sing, and it would be emphasized the value of serving one another, right? And so that's where I heard a lot about it, definitely, I started in the Catholic Church, didn't stop there, in Centers for Spiritual Living, where I have grown up, we do that. We talk about those things, but just, I'm not hearing about it right now. And it's okay if I'm alone. This will still hopefully connect. With that experience, Reverend Liz said I could pick whatever I wanted to talk about. Which doesn't happen, so I was like, ooh, here we go. But because I've been having this experience of separation and distance, and not that coming together, not that little girl hugging her big brother, so excited that he's come home, or holding hands with strangers, and recognizing our connection, I really wanted to focus on compassion and our experience of the broader we, of our we-ness in here and beyond. And so my title today is Walking with Love, the Call to Compassion. And it might also be making space for compassion, because it takes something. Compassion takes something. Now, it comes more naturally to others, to some than to others. I'm a very self-centered person. Honestly, I'm an introvert. I'm an Enneagram 4, like all the things. So I'm very in my head. It takes something for me to come out and see the world. But there are invitations where we can do that. But what I want to really talk about today is, what does it mean to truly walk with love? To walk in our lives daily and regularly with love. And when I focus on compassion, and this is my Catholic showing, compassion means to suffer with. To suffer together. And suffering is, in my experience with every single person I've ever met, something that none of us get out of. We have pain and suffering in the world. It happens. And sometimes what happens in circles like these is that we have a bad reputation for doing some spiritual bypass. Well, it's all God. Focus on the positive. Focus on that thing out there that you want, not the thing right here that you're having. And while it's important to elevate our thoughts and our ideas and our minds and have an intention for something greater than our current experience, it's also really painful and damaging if we don't create space for and time for our current experience that might be painful. When we skip over that, we don't leave it behind, right? If we don't give space and time to our experience of sadness, of sorrow, of depression, of suffering, we don't just get to set it aside. It comes with us. It comes in us. We carry it with us. And so I really want us to consider the idea of making and holding space for the pain that we have and for the pain and suffering that others may be experiencing. Suffering is a powerful force of love. Suffering, let me say that again. Suffering is a powerful force of love. And remember that God is all there is, not in the bypassy kind of way, but to bring within the goodness of God suffering. If there's nothing outside of God, then suffering is not outside of God. And we can bring it and engage with it and hold it in such a way that it transforms that pain and suffering into something new and beautiful and glorious. In the Gospel of Luke, if you'll open your Bibles, in the Gospel of Luke, we're taught about the Good Samaritan. Any of you remember that? The Good Samaritan story, the parable? And Jesus tells this story in response to a question from a lawyer that asks, "Who is my neighbor?" And the story of the Good Samaritan describes how a man is attacked and left by the side of the road, beaten and battered and bloody. And Several people passed by without helping. Not one person. And then the Good Samaritan, a Samaritan who is, as a Samaritan, identified as someone who is outside, who is an other, someone that we've othered. The Good Samaritan stops and helps and makes sure that the injured man is tended to and takes him to safety and makes sure that his care will continue. That's the Good Samaritan story. In that story, we have the person who walked by, the people that walked by, that saw the person that was suffering, that was battered, and continued on. They couldn't be bothered to stop, for whatever reason. And then the someone who could be bothered to stop. To be bothered is to be taken out of what you were expecting, of what you wanted. To be bothered, to be interrupted from what your journey was taking you on, is what the Good Samaritan decided to allow. He allowed himself to be bothered by the suffering of another. And I love this example because Jesus is teaching this and sharing this parable, but Jesus also gave many examples. There are many examples in the Bible of Jesus being willing to be bothered, right? Little children come and everybody's like, "Oh, don't bother him, he's so important." And Jesus is like, "No, bring the little children." The parents wanted them to be blessed. Many, many examples of Jesus' willingness to be bothered. So today I really want to talk about 3 ways that we are called to walk with love and embody compassion. The first is sitting with our own suffering. Woo! I'm also a Scorpio, if you don't remember that. Like, let's burn it up. Walking with others in their suffering and being present and interruptible for love. Those are the 3 things that we'll be talking about today. So, sitting with our own suffering. Now, compassion begins with self-compassion. How are you holding your pain, your discomfort? I know for myself, as conscious as I try to be, when that comes bubbling up, I'm like, get me out of here now. How can I pray it away? How can I meditate it away? What affirmations can I say to get over this pain and suffering? Rather than I hear you. I feel you. What do you need, my beloved self? To make space for our suffering as if it is the divinity of God, because it is. As if it is as precious as a little baby laughing. Our suffering is within the divine. It's not to like go through the valley of the shadow of death and like put up a tent and hang out there. That's not what I'm talking about. We are walking through the valley of the shadow of death. But there's a difference of like, it's not there, it's not there, it's not there, I don't see anything, everything's okay, everything's fine. I'm going to sing a little song about joy and not look at the pain in the valley of the shadow of death. Or I'm walking through the valley of the shadow of death. And this is flipping hard. And I love me. And I honor all parts of my experience. Our ability to have and hold compassion for others begins with our ability to have and hold compassion for ourselves. How are you walking through the challenges of your life? The pain in your life? It's not to shame you. It's just to reflect. I've been looking at this myself as I'm working on this talk, and let me tell you, it's a pain in the butt. I'm like, yep, I'm running through the valley of the shadow of death and singing my da-da-da-ba, boo 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 boo. It's all right. Yeah, jazz hands. You have to make space for your own pain and suffering. Not camping out, making holy space. And when we face suffering, knowing that we are never separate from the divine, God is in the suffering. Spirit has something for us. It's not that God's punishing us so that we can get something. I don't believe. But Spirit is in it because there is no place and no thing in which that divine presence is not. You guys heard about the pony and the poop? There's a pile of poop, the little kid's digging through the pile of poop. What are you doing? What are you doing? There's so much poop. There's got to be a pony in here somewhere. It's like that. To have that optimism that the divine is in the midst of this, even when it hurts like heck. Psalms 23. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You are with me. You, divine presence, you, that spirit, that energy of life that flows through, in, and as all of creation is right here and right now, in the midst of my suffering. You walk with me. You are in me. You are as me. You are through me. I don't do this by myself. Why is it important that we address compassion in ourselves? Well, let me tell you. Father Richard Rohr, who's down in the South Valley of Albuquerque, in his book Following Upward, says, if we do not transform our pain, we will most assuredly transmit it. If we do not transform our pain, take that time, be with it, know that it is operating in the divine, in the universe, in that thing that is operating for life all the time, and so therefore operating for me and my life all the time, to be with it or transmit it to other people. Right? And whether it's personal or cultural, it gets passed down, right? Family trauma, generational trauma, cultural trauma. How do we make space for the suffering for ourselves? How do we do that? I'm not going to answer that question for you today. How do you get creative and make space for your suffering to allow the pain instead of pushing it away so that you don't transmit it out into your family, to your friends, to your loved ones, to your community? You might not be aware of how you're doing it, but when we don't process it, when we don't be with it and allow it to pass through, we carry it and it comes out somehow. Being with yourself in that way is a particular kind of intimacy. And when we can be with someone else who is in their suffering, it is a particular kind of intimacy that we get to have with another person. It is a place of connection. I might not know you. I might not have familiarity of what the rest of your life is, but when I can be with you in your suffering, there is a particular kind of connection and intimacy that we get to have. It is a gift to have that experience. To suffer with another person is to honor our oneness and walk beside them without judgment or the need to fix. Mark Nepo, who's the author of 7,000 Ways to Listen, says, to listen is to lean in softly and with willingness to be changed by what we hear. When we are able and willing to sit with someone, to be with someone in their suffering, there is something that we receive out of that. So I'm a practitioner. And the most amazing thing that always happens is when I sit with someone for prayer, I am so deeply served. It often is actually something that I'm walking through, which is really fun. I'm like, how am I going to hold you in prayer when I'm doing this myself? And miraculously, I can. Thank you, God. But I get something out of it. I am uplifted. I am expanded. My awareness of the divine in my present moment is made clear to me. So when we have the honor of being with someone, being compassionate to another person, we are fed. We are uplifted. When I was a young girl, I had a really challenging experience. My mom and I was in the back seat, my mom was driving, and we came to an intersection in like the next town over. I lived in a teeny tiny little town. This one had a stoplight. So we were at the stoplight. And catty corner to us was a little bar, like, little small town, probably grimy. I never went in, so I don't know. I just in my mind, I'm like, oh, this little grimy bar. And this man came out, and it was morning. It seemed like in my recollection. He came out of the bar, and he fell over and was having a seizure. And I saw him, and I said, Mom, we have to go help him. Stay in the car. Do not she heard my conviction. She heard how much I wanted to go help him, and she was determined to scare the bejesus out of me so that I would not. And I didn't. I was a young girl, I don't know, 9. And I didn't. And that has left a mark on me. I saw a man who was suffering, and everything in my being wanted to go and be with him, even if it was just to make sure that he didn't hit his head, or I didn't know. I was the little girl. But she didn't let me. And that left a mark on me. Compassion isn't just about a passive feeling. It's an action, a transformative force. Compassion is the act of sometimes deeply listening or being fully present to another person. And I think that in our lives of separation, of isolation, what becomes normalized is you do you and I'm going to do me. Surely there's somebody else who's going to come around and help that man from bonking his head, from rolling into the street. Someone else will call the police. There was no 911 back then. Something in us calls us to be of service to those that we see suffering, or to creatures, beautiful animals, our planet that we see and know are suffering. Something calls us to be in the presence and supporting that. And there has been a silencing, a numbing of that call. By choosing to be present with another person who is in pain, without rushing to fix or avoid it, we can transform not just our own suffering, but also the suffering of those around us, beyond that one situation. Just like when we talk about here, when we do our inner work, when we do the work of elevating our consciousness, of making ourselves aware of how we are living and what we are doing, when we do that for ourselves, we shine a light so bright, just like we did in the meditation, that others around us can see and experience that. When we dare to step forward in compassion, to show up, to listen to that still small voice that wants us to be there, to go, to serve, to be present with, to listen, to hold a hand, whatever it might be, we do something. There's an alchemy in that. And we uplift the vibration of our planet. That is the ultimate gift of the holidays. When we remember one another, when we remember that I might be having an okay time, but someone else might not be, what might I possibly do? That when we do that, when we give ourselves permission to step forward and out of our own little box, to be present and with another person, we expand the light and consciousness of our planet. This is what we're here to do, no? Sorry, that was in Spanish. No? Yes? No que no? Sorry. Spanish, right, we're here to do that, yes? Okay, right. I'm like, that didn't land. What happened? And how do we do this? Well, my friends, oh my goodness, I need more time. True compassion requires us to be available to slow down, to notice, and to respond to life's interruptions, to dare to be bothered. Because we're on our path and we want to do something and we have a plan and we're going to dinner and we're cooking and we need to buy presents and we have this other thing to do and we've got a list and this thing is happening. Are we willing to be interruptible, to be bothered in order to transform the world? Are we willing to step out beyond what our schedules say we can or can't do? Richard Rohr says that love often calls us to step out of our comfort zones, allowing God's presence to work through us and for us. Do we make time for the people or situations we might otherwise see as interruptions? Again, I'm not pointing the finger except right here. In a world that focuses on efficiency and productivity, that's really hard. So we have to be conscious, right? Getting rid of our negative self-talk is really hard. We have to be conscious. Thinking in lack and limitation can be really hard. We have to be conscious. So it's the same thing. When we live in a world that focuses on productivity and getting more done in less time, we have to elevate our consciousness and become aware and say, hold on. Who am I? Who am I? And what am I here to do? Are you interruptible? And so as we talk about compassion, it's sitting with our own suffering, walking with others in their suffering, and being present and interruptible for love. So this week I'd like to invite you. Here we go. The invitation. Get out your notebooks. Reflect on an area of your life where you've avoided pain. Let's start with the easy one. And what would it mean to sit with that pain in love? What would it mean for you? What would it look like for you? Only you can determine that. And then I'd like to invite you to think of someone in your life who may need you to simply walk beside them. How can you show up fully for them this week? Not fixing, just making and holding space for their pain. And ask yourself, how can I be more interruptible this week? Where might love be calling me to pause and to serve? And the advanced version, who in the world that you don't know could you use or could use compassion? Who looks like an inconvenience or an interruption to you? And will you consider answering that divine invitation, that call within you, and walk with love and show up with them? Namaste.